Stafford, Menifee.
And what is your relationship to Doretha Stafford?
Doretha Stafford is my lovely, loving mother.
What do you admire most about your mother?
Wow, there's so much that I admire about her. I think for me, what I admire most about my mother is that she truly is a woman of God and has always been. However, she truly does come from the University of Hard Knocks, in that she had a lot of challenges growing up. She had a lot of, I think of mother to son when I think of my mother, and how in spite of all of the challenges that she's had over the years that I've watched her go through, she never gave up. She never lost her faith in God. She kept pushing, and she kept inspiring us to push through whatever it is that we're going through. And so I think that's what I admire most about my mother, just that push through spirit that she has. Please state your name.
Annette Stafford Brown.
And what is your relationship to Doretha Stafford?
I'm her oldest, firstborn child.
All right. I'm going to ask you a few questions, Mrs. Stafford, and I ask that you just be your beautiful, candid self. So, what do you admire most about your mother?
Her consistency in reference to the word. She practiced what she speaks. She grew up in a church, very religious person, and what you saw at church, you saw at home. She was very consistent. And one thing she said, she says that all the time, that her mother, the difference, her mother was also a very religious person, but her mother was perceived as putting the church before her children. And my mother always said she vowed never to do that, and she really never did that. She really, she loved God. She put God first, but she put her children first. It was like a combination of definitely putting God, because you put God first, but she really put her church, her children, her church, her children. So because of that, it was a kind of a balance. Understanding her children, but understanding that her life revolved around God. But her children never went neglected. They never could say, oh, I didn't perceive being neglected by my mother because of church.
Okay, thank you. What characteristic would you say, the most dominant characteristic, I'll say, would you say that you got from your mother?
caring about other people, compassionate, having a heart, you know, and kind of being a little sensitive, but in a good way. I think it was, you know, good, sensitive to other people's and sensitive to yourself too. So, yeah.
All right. How would you describe the first 15 years of your life?
Normal kid stuff. No, I think because I was the oldest, I know I challenged my mother a lot. I challenged my father a lot because they were both in the church, and some things I didn't always agree on. So I think I kind of broke the barrier for my sister's siblings. I was more at, you know, some things I thought kind of like might have been a little too rigid. So I would challenge it a little bit by not necessarily following through. And I always was one that, you know what, I want to do this so bad that I'm going to deal with the consequences.
Give us some examples of some of the things that you really wanted to do.
Well, I think my mother was she kind of talked to you. I mean, you got, you know, physical discipline, but to me, I always saw her as the one that talked to you. My dad was more of a physical disciplinary. I think my mother tried to I always saw that my mother tried to make you understand why she was doing what she did. My dad, on the other hand, sometimes I almost felt that he would tell you, you kind of knew why, but it was more in his mind that, you know what, you disobeyed me, and these are the consequences. Where my mother, I felt like, especially as a teenager, I felt she was more, workable. Like I felt my dad was a little bit kind of rigid, but I felt my mother was a little bit more workable. Like she understood. I always felt like when I was a teenager, even when I was young, my mother used to take me to parties. She wasn't a party person. My mother never even, you know, she didn't get out there, she didn't drink, she didn't go to no parties, everything. If it wasn't about religion, she wasn't doing it. She was not doing it. But she also tried to be balanced. She didn't want us to be so tight. She didn't want to be so rigid with us, and she wanted us to have a kid's life and a teenage life. Then she would take us places. I remember, again, as a kid, 9 or 10 years old or 11 years old, my mother would take me to parties and she would pick me up. My mother she knew I was the type that liked to dance. So my mother would have parties, you know, like my dad she might ask my dad, well, we giving Ned a party. Let her have a party. My dad was a little bit more rigid. He was a little more, and that was interesting to me. That's why I said my mother was more consistent in her religion. And see, her religion was her foundation. And I think because my dad, I didn't understand because he was a Methodist preacher. And I guess I perceived them to be a little bit more flexible. But then with me, I felt I was like, man, he acting like he in the Church of God in Christ because he rigid as heck. And while my mother was more flexible, she would try to explain to you. It was interesting because based on their religion, I perceived that they had the different roles. I saw different roles. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Different, like my father, I guess because he was a Methodist preacher, he should have been a little bit more flexible.
Right.
I could see my mother, because of the teachings in their church, I thought she would be more rigid. But it was the opposite.
Okay.
It was the opposite. And I thank God for I love my father, love my mother, but I thank God for my mother because I think if it had not been for her, I don't know if I would have gotten what I feel, the balance, you know.
Okay,
I mean,
so
I still
like
gave her a hard time, but I reflect that she talked to me a lot.
all right, so it sounds like it was a nice balance between the two of them, mom and dad. Yeah, all right. So, and thank you for that. Can you list perhaps one or two seeds that your mother planted in your life as a child that you can clearly see has now blossomed in your life as an adult?
I think it's the prayer, the spirituality, there is a God, and that God is your everything. You know, and I see it happening. God came through for her, and I think because because I always say, God, I had such a praying mom and a praying grandmother. But in particular, I said my praying mom, that I think her, you know, he rewarded her with her children being, you know, overall pretty good kids.
Okay. Would you consider yourself as a child as having been a good kid?
Not as a child. I gave her a challenge. You know, I don't think it, I mean, for our house, for my household, and I was the oldest, because my, you know, everybody was, for the most part, pretty compliant. And I think, I know I tested the ropes. I definitely tested the ropes. I challenged my mom.
Give us an example.
My mother was so nice. One time she was so determined she was going to make sure that all of her children knew how to drive. So she let me drive her car. And I remember one time begging her. I said, Mom, I'm just going up the street. I had my permit. But I was like, oh, Mom, I'm just going up the street. I remember going all the way up to Lane Tech High School. And I remember somebody hit the car. And I just towed my mother's car up. And I was like, oh my God, my mother was so nice to me. And I remember tearing her car up. I didn't have a problem with my father because he wouldn't let me drive his car. It was like, you ain't never got to get no driver's license with him. But Mom was like, okay, you know what? I want all my girls to have a driver's license.
Indigo, what has your grandmother taught you that you will then pass on to your children?
A sense of community outside of our immediate family, um, even outside of what's outside of the immediate family. I think a lot of people view community as something that needs to be what you have at school or what you might have at work or what you might have in your own immediate community that you live in, and it doesn't need to be that way. And I like that she goes out, she helps people that might not be in the neighborhood as hers because her community is doing a bit better because she's put that work in. So she goes out and she steps out to other communities to further impact them for the better. And that's something I really want my kids to take in as well.
Thank you. are here at West Point Cemetery, and the particular monument that I'm standing in front of was dedicated to Mr. James Fuller. Actually, it's a photo or a statue of Mr. James Fuller. Mr. James Fuller was one of the few Union soldiers who helped to fight during the Civil War and helped in the cause of trying to free the slaves. As we know, that was one of the most pressing issues in that day, that of slavery. And so he was one of the brave Union soldiers who helped to dismantle and eradicate slavery, and that's the significance of this statue.
Hello,
What is your name?
my name is Doretha Richardson Stafford.
Nice to meet you, Doretha Stafford.
Thank you, my beautiful daughter, Dana.
You're quite welcome. I'd like to ask you a few questions to give us a historical context for this interview. When were you born?
I was born September the 21st, 1932.
Okay. Can you describe the first 10 years of your life?
We was in the cotton fields of Louisiana. I picked cotton at the end of the season. We would pick cotton in the fields of other farmers, mostly which was white. And we would get up every morning, and my mother never worked in the field. She always worked at home, and she would get up and cook us chicken and rice. That's the kind of breakfast we had down south. And we raised chickens in the backyard, and my mother would kill the chicken by wringing the chicken's neck, and then after she would take the feathers off the chicken, and she would run some hot water. You know how that's done. And then she would cut the chicken up, and then that would be our breakfast: fried chicken and rice and homemade biscuit. And we would get up every morning and go to the fields to pick cotton and farm. And we did that until I was 15 years old. And the last 13 or 14 years, not only did I pick cotton, I even worked in the white people's home cleaning up. And I remember telling the lady the last year that I worked in her home that we was going, at the end of the year, we was going to Chicago. And of course, she discouraged me because she was saying that there was slums in Chicago, but I told her the part that we was moving to, that it was not slum. And the reason we was moving to Chicago was because we wanted a better life for ourselves.
Can I ask you a question to that point? Do you think when the white woman discouraged you from moving to the South and talked about the slums, do you think that she was genuinely concerned for your safety, or you think she just didn't want to see you realize your dream?
She didn't want to see Negroes, at that time we was called, do better. And she instilled in us that we could be whatever we wanted to be, but it would take hard work. And in different situations, she would encourage us. She encouraged my older brother that to better his life was to go into the armed service, which he did, but then he came back south to visit us. And we would be in the cotton field picking cotton, and he would come out, and the white man noticed a black man with a shirt coming into the cotton field, but he wasn't picking any cotton, so that was a problem with them. So my mother had encouraged my brother to go back north where he was at the time, at that time, after he came out of the army.
Did your mother perhaps fear that some harm would come to this brother because he had a different mindset returning to the South? Did she feel like he would be in jeopardy being in the South?
Yes, yes, and that's why she wanted us to have a better life by moving to the north. And she encouraged us that if we pick cotton hard and earn money at the end of the year, even though we didn't make enough money picking cotton in our field, excuse me, that's why we went and picked cotton in the white man's field to make money so we would be able to come to Chicago. And at the end of the day, I kept a record of the cotton that we had picked so that they could not perhaps steal from us. I felt, as young as I was, I felt that as long as you had a record of everything, it was hard for them not to be honest with you.
Well, to that point, I would ask you this: was it customary for the white folks in the South to allow you to pick cotton and work, from sundown to sun up, or sun up to sundown, and then turn around and cheat you? Was that a common practice in the South?
Oh yes, because even with us picking cotton in the white man's field, we were sharecroppers. And sharecroppers mean that it's the white man cotton field, but you rent it, for 1 year to the other. And they made sure that you didn't make any money, so you would be beholden to them to work another year. We was
Wow.
never out of debt. We always was left owing the white man money. In other words, we couldn't feel free to leave because we still owe them money that we had to work off the next year.
Almost sounds like a state of a little kind of sophisticated slavery.
Well, it all depends. At that time, it seemed like that was the way it was in the Southland.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt like in order for us to do better, it was best for us to move to Chicago.
All right, thank you. I've often heard you say that you were a graduate of Hard Knocks. Can you elaborate on what that means for you?
Say that question again.
I've often heard you say, Mama, that you were a graduate of Hard Knocks.
Well, what that meant was that you never gave up. You even though they, and when I said they, I mean the white race, they made you feel like you was lesser than them, you was inferior to them, but you knew who you was, you knew that God had created you, and God had no respect of person, and that sort of motivated us. And there were hard knocks because we couldn't go to school like I guess we would say the white family, because we had to work in the field. And
Can I interrupt you there? What impact do you think that had on your family? The fact that they had to choose between working in the field and going to school. How did that impact your family unit?
well, in those days, that was life. That was the life of a black man down south. So we expected it to be the way it was. It wasn't like, because that's all we knew. And want to say that sure it affected us, but we just learned that that was the way of life, and we did the best that we could, and we felt like coming to the north would be better for us.
Thank you. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment and why?
But let me piggyback, because when we was down south, we raised everything to eat on the farm. Watermelon, corn, and what we liked going to the store getting was light bread. We loved to go to the store and get light bread.
Why?
Because to us that was I guess like cake or something. It was something good that we looked forward to, because we raised everything else on the farm, but we didn't raise light bread on the farm. And when we went to the store to get light bread, oh my God, we could eat light bread just like you would probably eat a slice of cake or a pie.
Okay. So, how different was your life once you did manage to come to the north? What was kind of like your first impression when you saw your first home in Chicago?
Well, coming from the South, I knew that as a little girl coming up, we could not say yes or no to the white race. It was yes ma'am or yes sir. And on our way coming to Chicago, we stopped in a particular store. We was not in the north at that time, but I decided that since I was coming to the north, it was okay for me to say no and yes. And as we was in the store and the clerk asked me something and I said yes and I said no, but then after I said yes and no, I became a little afraid. We was on our way to Chicago, but we hadn't got to the north, and I guess I was so excited until I thought maybe it was okay for me, even though I was still in the South, it was okay for me to say yes and no. But when I did it, I did become a little afraid.
How would you describe your dad?
My dad was a hard-working father, and he was a pastor, and sometimes he pastored two churches, and he would go from one church to the other. We didn't have a lot of members, but he was a hard-working father that loved his family.
Very loving.
Very loving father.
Very protective.
Very protective. But he didn't want to come to the South because he said it was too cold.
Okay. What would you say? How would you describe your mom?
My mom, that's where we got our really encouragement from our mother. Because she always said that she wanted us to have a better life, even when it came to education.
Who, Mrs. Stafford, is the oldest ancestor that you can remember in your bloodline?
I would say it was my grandmother, and I was so much like her.
What was her name?
Grandma Sally Barnes. And even after I had a family, I moved. She lived in Kansas City, and even I moved to Kansas City, and I only had one child, and I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I moved to Kansas City, and my grandmother came and stayed with me and my husband.
Wonderful. Did she help you with your daughter?
My grandmother, she was just fond of her family, and we didn't need a lot of help with the family. We saw her, didn't want her to be included in like raising the children, because she had raised her family.
So you didn't want to burden her.
Correct.
What?
But she gave us good instruction, and she prayed for us, and she always let us know it was always better to do the right thing and treat people the way you wanted them to treat you.
All right. And so what year were you born again?
I was born in Gibbler, Louisiana,
What year?
1932.
And so we know your dad was born in 1897, which means that Grandma Sally would have been at least one generation older than him, which means, was she born during or right after slavery? Do you know?
Grandma Sally, I think it was during slavery time. I'm not sure, but the accommodation in the South was not very good at that time.
All right. All right.
And to add to that, maybe I shouldn't go into this, but on my dad's side, they had land. They had a lot of land, but some way or another, it was a dispute within the family, and the land ended up being in the hands of the white man.
Wow. Do you know how much land you had?
It was quite a bit. I don't know exactly the amount, but it was. And to add to that, on my grandmother's side, we still have land in Louisiana.
Do you know how much?
No, but I do know that we get a certain amount of money every month off the oil
That's wonderful. So,
from the land.
so which of your ancestors would you say put that in place? Would that have come as a result of your mother or your grandmother?
On my mother's side,
Your grandmother on your mother's side.
yes.
Wonderful. What trait would you say you took from your mother? What's maybe the most dominant characteristic or trait that you can say you know that you got it from your mom, just watching your mother?
My mother was a leader, and she loved her family, and she taught us that hard work and do the right thing, we could be whatever we wanted to be. And my mother had a lot of faith. She just believed that life would be better if you worked hard, and she really put a lot of stress on education. And she felt like the more education you got, that you could always get a better job and do better in life.
Yes. What trait would you say, the most dominant trait would you say that you took after your dad?
Well, my dad, he loved his family, and he was a pastor. He always taught the Word of God, and he would always invite people in our homes, and he was just a loving father.
Wonderful.
And he loved God, and he loved the people in whom he pastored.
Okay. And so you are again, what age, young lady?
Well, at that time...
What age are you?
Oh, now?
Yes.
Hallelujah. I will be 90 years old in this coming September, the 21st.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so as a person 90 years old, I know that you have seen pretty much everything that a person can see in a lifetime, and have experienced a lot. Can you share with us any regrets that you may have that in your own life, that if you had the opportunity to help a young person not have that regret, you could share that with them? Do you understand what I'm saying? like, is there anything about your lifetime that you wished you could change?
Not really. I can say this about my mom. Maybe because she had 11 children, and at the end of her motherhood, she spent a lot of her time in church. And some of us, especially me, was the one that sort of raised the younger children. And I had said that that was one mistake that I would not make. That I would be able to balance my life by serving God and still put my family first. That I would never neglect my family and my husband to do God's work. So there's not really a lot of regrets, because I lived a full life. It was struggles in my life, but I never gave up. I always knew that things would be better, that it would never be the same. Each day would bring something that's better. And I always felt like that you had to think good about yourself and remember who you are and do the right thing. And I feel like today, because I was a blessing to so many people, that's why I am so blessed, that I would like to include, as a Christian lady, there was certain things we was taught that we could not do. And I was one of the 11 children would more or less follow the rules that was taught to me from the church and from my parents. And there was a time when they would tell us we couldn't even go to a ball game, and the rest of the kids would go, and they would say, if I'm punished for going, it would be worth it. But I took another route. I just sort of obeyed the rules and the regulations that they had laid out before me.
All right, so you were very obedient to God as well as to your parents.
Yes, I was.
And you found that to be a successful way to live.
Yes, and another thing that I would like to sort of talk on is from the age of 16 until 26, I more or less took care of my parents. And I was the only one at home. Even the younger ones more or less had gotten married. And I took joy in taking care of my parents, because I know the Bible said, honor your father and your mother, and that's what I did. And with my family and the way they support me and love and care for me, I never thought, even though I did that for my mom, but I never thought it would come to me. But that reminded me of the scripture that says it's more blessed to give than to receive.
All right.
And I also would like to add, even at the age of 85, the doctor diagnosed me with stomach cancer, but today I am cancer free. And I give praises to God, because I know that it's Him that healed my body, because the scripture said, by your stripes you are healed. And I had faith to believe that the healing would take part, in which it did. And I give glory and honor to God.
Wonderful. And so, Mrs. Stafford, I'm going to leave you with one final question, and that is for the future generations, because our hope and prayer is that just as your grandmother Sally was an inspiration to you, that this movie that will forever be archived in our family history will be a blessing to the future generations, to my daughter, to my sister's daughter and sons, and so for your grandkids and great grandkids and those who are even not yet born. What advice Or what is it that you want to tell them? What do you want to say to them? What kind of advice could you give to them?
Well, number one, do what's right. And whatever way you want to be treated, that's how you treat another person. And you will be blessed from that. And also, trust God. I could not have made it this far without trusting in God. There have been struggles in my life, but I always trusted God and put everything in His hand. And I would tell the next generation to just do what's right. Sometimes you feel like right is not winning, but in the long run, right always wins. And also, just treat your fellow man the way you want to be treated. And keep an open mind. Don't be so judgmental. And we all make mistakes. We all fall down. But the most important thing is getting up.
Mrs. Doretha Stafford, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment in life, and why do you say that?
I believe that motherhood. I grew up within a big family, 11 of us. I did not want to have that many children, but I did want to have children. But I was a little choicy in picking a soulmate. And it took me longer because I was taking care of my family from the age of 16 years old. I got a job until I was 26 years old when I got married. And before I got married, I had a job working ever since I was 16 years old, and they would always have a Christmas party, so I would take my nieces and nephew to the Christmas party every year. And after I got married, 26 years old, I felt like perhaps I didn't have a lot of time left, so I had my children more or less back to back. So I had 4 girls and 1 son. So I do feel like that was part of my accomplishment. And then in school, I was inspired by the teachers that taught me that I could be whatever I wanted to be, along with my mom, that it took hard work and perseverance. And I was up to the test. And I also believed in God. I believed that, as the Apostle Paul said, through the Christ that strengthened me, I can do all things. So I had a big, I would say, faith in God, that my mother always taught me, do unto others as you would for them to do unto you. And I also was taught that it was more blessed to give than it is to receive. And I feel like I'm the mother and grandmother and prayer warrior and community activist today that I am was because of my faith in God. Coming from a Christian family, as I have stated before, that my father was a pastor and evangelist, and he traveled all over the world. And my mother, she was a missionary. She had faith in God that if you worked hard and trust in God and did what was right, that you could accomplish whatever your desires was in life.
So, kind of like to piggyback on that question, and just to kind of state it another way. So, I hear you saying your biggest accomplishment was being a wonderful mother, which you are. what would you say about your life? Just if you could name one thing about your life that you're most proud of, what would it be?
The most proud thing in my life is loving people. I am a people person, and I'm always lifting up the downtrodden, and wherever I'm needed, I just have that love and compassion in my heart is to help people. And even in my community, we put a prayer group on the corner, and I just feel like my greatest success is being a child of God and helping everyone.
All right, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about, well, let's backtrack. We started earlier in the interview talking about your impressions and the difference between what it was like to live in the South versus the North. And we are going to come back to what was your first impressions when you saw your first home in the North versus what you had been accustomed to in Louisiana?
Well, I found out that it was better in the North, but there still was discrimination also in the North. Even in school, you could see it, and wherever you went, it wasn't as bad as in the Southland, but there was still discrimination in the Northland.
As well, but not quite as bad.
Right, not quite as bad.
All right. What kind of accommodations that you have when you lived in the South? Give us a sense of what your physical home looked like in the South versus what your first home looked like when you were in the North.
Well, in the South, naturally, they didn't have nice homes. We had I would say just a common home. You wouldn't call it a shack, but it was a nice. I'm thinking it was made of lumber. It wasn't brick. But when we came to Chicago, our home was a brick 3-story building, and the walls was white as snow, and the floors was just really shiny, and we were just so excited, even though we didn't have a lot of furniture, but we had the love of family, and we were just excited to be living a better life than what we was living in the Southland.
Very good. As I'm sure millions and millions of African Americans had the same or similar testimony. So let me move on to some other things. Who in the world, if you could think of one historical figure in the world that you really just admire, who would that be and why?
Well, from the Southland, we always admired Mahalia Jackson because she was our spiritual singer, and she gave us that spirituality that I found out was very successful in our life. And then down through the years, I looked at Martin Luther King, I admired him, and of course, our first black president, I always called him my son, and I really admired him. So there are other ones that I could mention, but right off, I think those are the 3 most ones that influenced my life.
Right, thank you.
To what extent has your life been blessed by having a wise mother?
I think that my life has been blessed in so many ways by having a wise mother. I think the benefit, probably most, is that as you go through the lifespan and different stages of your life and you're not quite sure what to do at critical moments in your life, it's really comforting to know, and it's very good to have someone who you know loves you unconditionally, who is only going to give you advice that you know is best for you, tailor-made for you. And so that is one benefit. And in doing that, she instilled so much wisdom and stories and scenarios because of so much that she has seen in her lifetime. I was able to listen, and some of the pitfalls perhaps that I would have fallen into because of her wisdom, I didn't fall into them.
How do you perceive your relationship? How do you perceive your relationship with your mother, growing up and also now?
That's a good question. I would say I'll start with growing up. I think the way I perceived my relationship with my mom growing up was that I saw that my mother at a certain point in her life just needed some support and needed some help. She had 5 children, and she was a working mom. My dad was working. He also was pastoring, and so I could just see that my mother needed some assistance. And so I think my role or my perception drove me to say if there was anything as a child that I could do to help alleviate some of the burdens that were placed on any mother, and of course on my mother, I was willing to do that. And so I think that I began to be at a very early age a shoulder that she could kind of lean on. She could ask me to do different things, and at first I didn't want to do them, but eventually I enjoyed going to the grocery store. I enjoyed running errands and that kind of thing. So I think that was kind of the nature of our relationship growing up. She was just instilling traits in me that would cause me to be strong and cause me to be a giver and cause me to want to be a cheerful giver, if you will. And so how is that impacting me in my adult life or my perception of our relationship now? I think we have a very good relationship. I think that, as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. My mother has definitely sharpened my blade, and I think I have sharpened hers as well. I think that I can say confidently that my mother has a beautiful silver crown of hair, and I know that I helped to put some of those gray hairs there. But my mother just being a really good mother, a woman of faith, when she wasn't able to get me to see her perspective, she just would talk to God about me. And so now what's interesting is I see myself saying the same things that my mother said, and I can hear myself thinking the same thoughts. And when I'm by myself sometimes and I don't know what to do, I'm able to go back to the different things that she said to me over the years, and it really helps me and comforts me and guides me even to this day.
Okay, what was your mother and father's parenting style?
I would say that my mother was, I wouldn't really characterize her as a helicopter parent. I think she was a very involved parent. We always knew first and foremost that we were loved. We knew first and foremost that there were certain things that she was going to do to give us a sense, or to give me a sense of safety and security. I think that she stressed early on the importance of education. Her parenting style was really not one of shying away from tough conversations. I remember a time when I was in high school and I didn't do well one semester, and my mom said, Dana, I was really overly concerned with the way my appearance and not so much the books at that point in my life. And I remember my mother said, I was on the pom-pom team, and she said, Dana, if you want to remain on the pom-pom team, you must turn these use grace and 2 and 8. And she meant business. And I knew that she meant business, and I was able to turn those grace around. And I thank her now for that. Then it felt very tough. She kind of had some tough words to say to me in terms of what my life would look like if I didn't get on top of my education. And so she was that kind of a mother. She wasn't afraid to divvy out tough love. Very nurturing and compassionate and loving, but wasn't afraid to have tough conversations when she needed to.
How has your mother influenced you? Father's style of parenting.
All right, I would say my father's style of parenting was, he was kind of, I would say I saw my father as the disciplinarian. He was kind of hands off. He let my mom pretty much have the decision making when it came to the day-to-day types of things, the raising of us. But if my mother went to my father and said, hey, Dana did something, she said something, she was out of line, he took his cues from my mother. If she said, you need to get her, then my dad would come in and he would get us, and he would, he could be heavy-handed. But if she didn't say that you need to get her or chastise her or whatever, then he was very just kind of fun-loving and a jokester, and I would say just kind of, I won't say a hands-off, but he did not stress many of the things that my mother did, although I know he stood for the same thing. So he kind of gave us a little bit more freedom from my perspective.
And how has your mother influenced you as a child and as an adult, and now as an adult?
How has she influenced me as a child? I would say she taught me, because I can have a fiery spirit, and I think she just taught me that even when someone wrongs you, that you don't have to fight back. And it took me a very, very long time to learn that lesson, but she modeled it for so many years. And so I think now that I am at the age that I am now, I can appreciate what she had been saying all along. She was always consistent in saying, turn the other cheek. She was always consistent in saying, just because someone wrongs you, you don't have to come back and wrong them. And so now I can see that manifesting in my life. And I'm blessed for it.
One of the things I learned, like, that school didn't teach me, but I learned, like, throughout my life, is that, life is going to throw you a lot of, my mom used to always say, life throws you a lot of curveballs, and you'll get knocked down, but the true measure is, like, how you get up, so just learning how to deal with adversity, learning how to, get up when injustices or things that, you feel shouldn't have happened to you, these things kind of, take you off course, so to speak, but, you can always get back on course, and you can always, pick up the pieces and get back up and try again.
Are there any other words? You said that your mom would say you have to kind of roll with the punches. Are there any other kind of like pearls of wisdom throughout the years that you can say when you find yourself in a difficult situation? Perhaps she has imparted to you, and it has then helped you.
Yeah, I think like a large portion of scripture from the Bible definitely resonate within me. I would say, so as a man thinketh, so is he. Always like think good of yourself. Think the best of yourself. Think about the best version of yourself, even if it's aspirational, even if you're not actually practicing it right now. You know that you have the ability to be a better version of yourself. So yeah, it's so many, but that one is something that stuck with me.
Can you explain a term that I understand Mrs. Doretha Stafford often says to her kids, amongst their graduations from college, she would often say, well, I graduated also, but I graduated from the school of hard knocks. Can you kind of elaborate on that in terms of her very humble beginnings and how the knocks of life then transmitted to her and then to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So yeah, one time for School of Hard Knocks, I'm a graduate of that as well. So I would definitely say, like, when I think about kind of like alluding to your earlier questions, like what things that maybe a traditional school, you know, may not teach you, is like, you know, similarly to like I would be in school and maybe algebra and certain lessons, right? And I'm like, you know, what am I gonna need this for, right? Like, how does this show up as life goes on and as I grow? How can I apply these things, right? And you may struggle to find a reason. But when you come from the School of Hard Knocks, there are so many like practical, you know, ways of like applying the things you learn through life. So I would say, you know, definitely my mom, as I learned the history of my family, understanding that, you know, coming from the South and a lot of the prejudices, racism, and injustices that went on in the South, and how my mother and our family forged ahead. How my mom was one of the kids who went to school to learn how to keep a ledger, so that, you know, when it was like the sharecropping, you know, sometimes that there would be discrepancies in wages and things like that. So just like ways of like bettering yourself, to make sure that you can like be able to advocate for what's right, and get treated fair and with respect and dignity. And for me, the School of Hard Knocks were like, you know, just kind of understanding that, you know, life is going to throw you a lot of curves. A lot of times that everyone that's like in your circle or space, right? Like understanding like how to really vet people's characters, how to really like, you know, determine if someone or something is good or not, right? So having that discernment, I think those are a lot of like tools I picked up, you know, in dealing with life. And then just understanding how blessed of a family I came through, because there was a part of my life where, you know, I lived in poverty and I struggled, right? So just really reflecting like, you know, this may be your temporary situation, you know, but just keying on that it's temporary. What can you pull out of this situation that can arm you moving forward? And with me, it was a deeper understanding of like people, deeper understanding of like coming into relationship with one another and coming into right relationship with myself. So that just shows up in my life, being more humble and really appreciative and really grateful for, you know, a lot of things my mom and dad and family, you know, has imparted in me.
What would you describe, or what type of relationship would you say you had with your dad?
It was okay. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as my mom, because my mom was more available, but I knew my father loved me, and my sisters and brother. So it was okay. I didn't want to be disciplined by my dad. Whereas if my mother disciplined me or my sibling, it was with a belt. If my dad disciplined me or my sibling, it was with an extension cord. My mother may hit us maybe 5 or 6 times. My dad would hit us maybe twice, but it would leave whips. And it would probably be referred to as child abuse in this day and time.
And so, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because that seems to be a running theme in the African American community of a certain generation, wherein you disciplined your child with an extension cord. Do you think, or to what extent do you think that history
it has been passed down from the lashings that our ancestors once got
Right.
for trying to free themselves.
And it's a generational, because I'm sure his parents did it, and his grandparents did it, and their parents did it, and so forth. Although they did not, they may not have looked at it as possible child abuse. I think once it became apparent in the Black culture, many times family members did it because they felt they had to do it so that the police would not harm our children. So in that sense, the purpose switch, it pivoted, where it was a form of protection. I need to make sure that this is in order so that when you go out to the home, there's nothing, the likelihood of something dropping off or flying off is minimized. But I think that on a subconscious level, because it was something that started in slavery, not even realizing it is something that we continue to do, or we was doing at that time.
Okay, so we know that was a horrific trait that was passed down through the years that we still are grappling with. Can you think of maybe a couple of traditions that we have passed down through the centuries as a people that you would consider a good thing?
Well, back in the day, if you got into a situation, let's say at school, that was inappropriate, if you got into trouble, it was okay for Miss Jones that stayed across the street to discipline you, for Miss Lewis who stayed down the street to discipline you, and then your parents. In this day and time, there may be a physical altercation if you try to discipline somebody else's child, even though it's as a form of correction.
Okay.
So I think if we still had it takes a village, not only in words but in practice, that's something that can benefit our community.
So we're kind of going a little deep here. So we're going to go a little, take some more deep dives. You say that you are a social worker with the Child Protection Agency. How did your view on things inform your practice in terms of when you got a call and possibly a child would be separated?
Well, basically, even though, because I've worked in various capacities, including child protection investigator, but basically, the media may think, well, you're here to take my child. And my perspective was different. I'm here to keep you out of the system. I am here to support and keep you out of the system. I am here to make sure that you have the necessary resources, because things are not what they appear to be. And many times we get calls from grandmothers, and I can understand they're tired, but coming into a structured, racist, governmental system where the disparities are so great is not the way to support your child. So just to assist the families in finding resources so that child protection is not an option.
Okay, wonderful. So again, we both agree that the taking away of children and the breaking up of families is something that has a long history in America when it comes to African Americans. And so since you understand that, you do just the opposite in the position that you've been placed in.
That's right, and pretty much may have had a reputation as being a rebel.
Okay, well, Jesus was a rebel.
But my mother was a rebel, Doretha Stanford also.
Do you think her mother was a rebel?
Maybe in some forms, but sometimes you could become a rebel because it's almost the opposite of what you grew up with.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Question? You still?
One of the things that I admire about my mom is her ability to fight for justice. She was not one to see a situation that was unjust and look the other way. So she was very, when it came to injustices, she was very bold.
I recall situations where she complained about children living in a home that she felt was inappropriate in the community. I recall situations where her and a group of neighbors went to court to ensure that the city of Chicago could not put a liquor store in a certain area in our community. So one of the things that I like about my mom is her activism.
Wonderful, thank you. In terms of her activism, we know that last year, under the wake of the George Floyd murder and the trial and all of the unrest that took place this past summer, knowing your mom, how do you think she felt about it all? Do you think that she would have been on the side with Black Lives Matter?
Well, she did what she could, because in her yard she has a Black Lives Matter sign. So it's not something that she speaks, it's something that she lives. So even though she's almost 90, excuse me, even though she's almost 90, she's still an activist. So in reference to not only George Floyd's situation, but other situations that have not come to the media attention, she has always been active in one way or another.
Wonderful. So that would be an affirmative. She would be pro Black Lives Matter.
Yes. I mean, she ordered, or she has a Black Lives Matter sign, Black Lives Matter shirt. So yeah, she's definitely involved, and just in talking to her, you can understand the passion that she feels when she speaks about what occurred, and sometimes the anger that she feels or that she felt.
Would you say that your mother's very pro-Black?
She's very pro-culture in reference to African American and people of minority status.
All right. I understand that many decades ago, your mom, Mrs. Aretha Stafford, was able to take a trip to the continent of Africa and see how things were across the pond. To what extent do you think that perhaps shaped even her activism?
I think it gave her a more global perspective. It's one thing to see things in your community or things in your state, but it gave her a whole different perspective when she saw things in another country, especially in the rich land of Africa.
Wonderful, thank you. What is it that you do for a profession? And how was your childhood, how did your childhood shape the profession that you now find yourself doing?
I'm a social worker for the state of Illinois. And prior to becoming a social worker, I've been doing really community service and community outreach and social work probably since I was about 8. I can recall a situation where there was an abandoned building on our block, and my mom said, okay, we got to get the picket signs because the media will be here. Even though the media didn't show up, just the ideal that we have to take an active stand. And I think at the time I was probably only about 8. I can recall times where I had to volunteer at a homeless shelter. I can recall times where at the age of 12, I worked, it was considered a summer job, but it was really community service, working at a elementary school in the sports division. So even though officially I started to a career after college in social work, through my family, I've done social work probably since the age of 8.
Wow, that's incredible. What would you describe, or what would you say is your greatest accomplishment, and why?
Well, coming from a spiritual perspective, I would say my greatest accomplishment is my relationship, my faith, my belief in my faith in Jesus Christ. I
above all, because and I think that's where my mom gets her strength from also, is her spirituality. So that would be my greatest accomplishment. And because of that accomplishment, it allowed me to do other things within the community.
Wonderful, thank you. Who would you say is your, which historical figure would you say is your hero, and whoever that person is, do you think that that was impacted at all, again, by the influence of your mother?
Well, it's kind of it's that same answer for both questions. So I would think my hero / shero would be my mother, because she has been consistent in my life. She's been there when I was on the track team, whether I came in second or third, whether I was the anchor, whether I was in the lead, whether I was in the middle, she was always there. If there were anything else going on at the school, she was there. If there was a pom-pom competition, she was there. So that would be my my hero, because she demonstrated it's not what you say, it's what you do. And she has been very effective in not only reaching out to our family, but our community as a whole.
Wonderful. And so, Gwen, you say you are the third of a siblingship of 5?
That's correct.
And are you a mother?
Yes, I am.
To what extent did your mother's mothering style impact the way you was a mother to your children?
Okay, well, in a good way. I tried to be consistent with my children, just as my mom was consistent with us. My mom also would she would work with other people in the community. She had a prayer ministry for young people on the corner who may not have known there was another way. And I think it's the way you look at people. She saw people just the way they were. She saw people based on their potential and not what they were, because what you are now is not who you can be. So your present situation does not determine your final outcome. So there is always room for growth. And she looked at people in reference to what they can be, and I look at the same thing, whether it's my biological children or my children through marriage, of what their potentials are, and people have great potentials.
What is your greatest accomplishment?
Oh man, that's it's kind of a challenging question. I'm proud of so much. I've accomplished, quite a bit, and I would say like probably the most thing that I'm proud of, and my greatest accomplishment is my evolution as a father. I think that so I'm the youngest of 5. I have 4 older sisters, and I think about my dad and like how fatherhood looked to him, and I remember a lot of times of like, just making sure that we were collectively together, and like we spent like time, like dinner conversations, things like that, and how that really, created a space, a belongingness, a feeling whole. So for me, I've tried to replicate that in how I model my walk as a father. Definitely, I have 4 daughters, so I definitely try to connect with them each in a special way. One, I think, create that space for values, like what's important to you, how do you live out those things, those kind of core values, and then also like, room to like have this like information sharing. You know what I'm saying? I've lived a very unique life, right? So I can share a lot of things, and those gems or nuggets, that my parents gave to me, I make sure to give those, down to my kids too, because, those are like ancestral, gifts, if you will. So I make sure that, hold it down that way.
Okay, that's very good. That takes me to my next question. You mentioned ancestral gifts. Can you think of the oldest ancestor that you were able to, let's say, interface with and or learn about? Who is the oldest of your ancestors that you can recall?
So I'm gonna say like my grandma, Grandma Richardson, to my mother's mother. There was a time we had family home, which is, North Lawndale, Chicago, off Trumbull. So, growing up, I remember just interacting, with her and my granddad. Whether it's just like coming in from a cold day, and school or something, and being able to like put my wet socks in and everything on the heater, while, she makes some cocoa and talk to me and ask me about how school was. And then it was a time later in life when she came to live with us in her twilight, of her life, and she loved the St. Louis Cardinals and baseball, right? So she loved Bob Gibson. So I remember, just sitting with her, watching a lot of baseball and watching a lot of Cardinals games, and we would just talk. And I really do appreciate those times, because my grandmother was a beautiful, strong woman, and like you just be knowing, like, for people to make it through life and still have this like richness, in this spirit, and strength and grace about them, they're aces with me. They're definitely a queen, and a lot can be learned, and the vibe and spirit is just right. So I was really fortunate.
I've heard a lot about Olivia Richardson. Did she wear also those big, beautiful, pretty church hats on Sunday?
She did. I think, back me growing up, like those were like de facto crowns, right? Like of like, one, you were God fearing, and you were church going, and also, it was a style to it too. So, wearing these hats and showing, beauty and just like reverence for church and worship. My grandma Olivia, she definitely had a wide array of hats. So her hat game was strong.
Is there, I'll go back to this one.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say what about your life? And I would say the life of, well, we'll just go with you. What about your life would you say you are most proud of?
I mean, I'm just proud of the fact that, like, I can be a beacon of hope and beacon of light, because I have a genuine, authentic story, right? My life. I've been through a lot of ups, I've been through some downs. I made my way through my downs and persevered, and I refined myself, right? So, like, I just always, like in the hood, in the community where I'm from, it's the hood I grew up in. So, like, a lot of people, I bring inspiration and hope to. So when you're a symbol of kind of something greater than yourself, I find that, like, that's God-like, right? That's, to me, a way that God is using you to connect with other people, to bring hope. You can inspire, people. You can, increase hope in individuals. And sometimes, like, real talk, it can be by the smallest things, but that lets you know that these people, they're really attuned, of your struggles, right? So, long suffering is a strength of mine. I'm able to go through adversity over time, right? And like, hey, come on, let's keep it real. That sucks, right? Who wants to do that? You know what I mean? But sometimes, I'm a firm believer that there's a lesson in a lot of your experiences, and oftentimes until you get that lesson. So in my case, a lesson was just like bringing me in greater connection with other people, having more empathy, not being as self-centered, you know what I'm saying? So I started to like really look outside of myself, but it had to be a difficult path for me to do that, right? So, it is people that I would say to the question you asked, like my greatest achievement, would be the fact that, I'm strong, I'm able to persevere, I'm a black man who's, made it to 50 plus, 51, and that's huge, you know what I'm saying? That's real huge. So, I'm really blessed.
Right, thank you. I understand also that you are the graduate of a quasi, or maybe not even quasi, an Ivy League university. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe even some of the barriers, or let's go with this. Maybe some of the attributes or some of the character traits that were passed down from you, from Olivia, from Floyd, from Doretha, that helped you to persevere and to graduate from such a prestigious university.
Yeah, I definitely, that's something I like to talk about because it's something that you can see through the generation, the investments that have been made in a particular area and that has bore, rich fruit. And one of them is through education. So education is something that has been modeled, for me generationally. So when I talked earlier about my mom, going to school, to learn mathematics, to be able to keep a ledger, right? Those type of processes were embedded, from then, and it was embedded through my mother by my grandparents, right? So my mom, she then replicated and fostered an environment, her and my dad, of where, doing well in school, and as a result of doing well in school, you can like create a ladder or a pathway socioeconomically, so you can sustain yourself, you can make money, you can just become a more well-rounded individual, so to speak. I definitely would say like being intellectual is a special thing, right? I like this blend of having this street knowledge, school of hard knocks, but also having like this high level intellectual knowledge, and I'm all filtering it through a West Side Chicago perspective, right? So that's pretty dope. So my pathway starts way back in the late 70s, early 80s in Chicago. There's a new policy of school integration. So kids from my neighborhood of Austin, we didn't have the best textbooks, we didn't have the best resources to learn. So now people from our community and other disadvantaged, marginalized communities, black and brown communities, have the opportunity to get on a school bus and go to your white communities and be able to access quality learning, for lack of a better term. And what that investment was made like when I was in 3rd grade. So I remember wanting to, stay at the neighborhood school because that's where my friends was, because this opportunity, it was a small cohort. So, my mom's like, you don't understand, my mom and dad was like, you don't understand now, but like, this is gonna pay off for you like later on in life. Now mind you, I had older sisters who, had started, my older sister was in high school, and there are features about the learning. It was learning, and it was learning in integrated environments that I was, in 3rd grade, when I went to Hitch School in Jefferson Park, which is an area and predominantly white community. And all my sisters had, been in schools that were integrated too. So you were starting to get like a greater access and understanding and learning about people's like ethnicities, different cultures, you know, and I think that was an asset, that was a strength. So with me, you know, from third grade on, I went to quality integrated schools and I succeeded in them. So whether it was Chicago Public School or when I was in high school, I went to all boys Catholic school, and then college, you know,
What's your name?
Alvin Coleman, Jr.
And what is your relationship to Mrs. Dorita Stafford?
She's my mother-in-law.
Oh, you say mother-in-law. Can you elaborate? And love?
She refers to me as her son-in-law, so I refer to her as my mother-in-law.
What is the most admirable trait that you see in Mrs. Stafford?
The most admirable trait I see in Mrs. Stafford, the most admirable trait I see in Mrs. Stafford is that she truly cares about everybody. Everybody.
How has Mrs. Stafford's political activism impacted your life? Has it been a bit of inspiration for you?
Her political activism.
Yes.
Wow. Has it impacted my life? I mean, she's not as political as politically involved as I see other people, other individuals in the area. But you know, her views and what she says and statements that she made through by herself and through other people, I take that to heart.
Okay. Was she instrumental, do you believe, in registering voters for the 2008 Barack Obama presidential campaign?
I believe she was, yes. I think she was. And I'm going to piggyback on her political aspirations or political inspiration to me. She got me involved in the elections. I wasn't involved in the elections that I had previously been in. And that's one of her attributes. She's always been positive about being involved in the that being said, I was able to be an election judge for quite some years because of her suggesting that I did it. So I saw the aspirations, I saw the entities and the back stories and the back sites of what they do on the polling places, which prepared me for when I was able to do it professionally.
Thank you. What has Mrs. Stafford modeled to you that you now model to the world?
To the world?
To the world.
Wow, I don't think I'm that global. So in my own community, in my own environment, what does she do that makes me and that I do in my environment? I would say approachable. She's always been approachable. I think. So I believe I'm approachable in what I do daily. I mean, I might not seem that way, but I'm open. She's open.
Okay, great. So people can kind of come to both of you if in need.
If in need.
Or if not in need.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you. If you could use one word or phrase to describe Mrs. Stafford, what would it be?
Prayer warrior. That's as far as long as I've known her, she's always been an advocate for prayer. She's always been a faithful, God-fearing woman, and she's always instilled that and inspired people to do that. She's always been a faithful, prayerful woman. So I say prayer warrior.
What traits do you see in your wife, Loretta, that undoubtedly was passed on to her by her mother?
Wow. All those attributes that I see in Mrs. Stafford, I see in my wife. My wife is a very generous individual. She's a very faithful individual. She truly sees the good in everybody, or tries to, and sometimes I don't. So I'll say that.
So in that way, would you say it would be safe to say that Mother Stafford's attributes are still yet making it to another 2 generations?
2 generations?
Because I would assume then you and your wife passed those things on, those attributes on to your daughter that you see?
My daughter, yeah, I do believe that. Yeah, I do believe that. I believe that all those things that I stated, we try to instill in our daughter, and she does. She'll show it every now and then. She might not be as faithful and as expressive as we are now, but I have faith that she's going to be a individual that shows her faith, uses her faith, and inspires her faith to other people.
Wonderful. Wonderful trait to pass down. How has Mother Stafford helped to shape or, in your opinion, contribute to Black history? In other words, do you consider her to be a Black history living legend, given that she's 90 years old and has seen so much in almost a century?
Her status as a Black history individual, just
Legend.
A legend. Okay, legend. Just the simple fact that she's almost 100. I mean, it's even though we strive to live as long as we can, and not a lot of people do that. So not a lot of people in any race is able to live past a certain age, and she has done that. So I mean, she's been able to, even in my short period of time on this earth, I've seen changes. Whereas I've seen certain industries change, and I've seen certain things change. She's seen more than I've seen. So just by doing that, just by being conscious and being here, that's a legend right there. Being able to inspire and recollect and recall
Thank you. We're going to wrap up now, Mr. Alvin Coleman. If there was one thing that you would just want to say to Mrs. Stafford that perhaps she does and or does not know from your lips to her ears, what would it be?
Oh, what she does not know or what she does know? I mean, she knows I love her. She knows that. I mean, even with the moniker of son-in-law, son in love, she knows that I love her. I mean, she knows, she should know, and I know she knows that I'll be there for her. You know, I will always do what I can. I'm always respectful, but I'm always there for her. What can I say to her that she doesn't know? I believe she knows everything. So I don't think she would not know anything other than the fact of how deeply I admire her and how deeply I love her. But I know she knows that, so that'd be an oxymoron. So I don't even know why I even said that. So with that being said, something that she doesn't know, it's hard to say that. I mean, it's hard to say for a person that has been as good and as faithful as she has been.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Will you please state your name and your relationship to Jerika Stafford?
My name is Loretta Coleman, and I am Jerika Stafford's second oldest.
All right. What do you do for a living, Mrs. Coleman?
I am a retired school counselor.
All right. How has being the daughter of religious parents shaped your work as a guidance counselor / case manager?
Well, I believe it shaped my work because I just believe in work ethics. You know, when I start a project, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to make sure it's the best of my ability, and I believe I received that somewhat from my mother and father, because when they start something, basically they finished it, especially with my mom. And then in counseling, you have to multitask. And I know I got that from my mother, raising 5 kids, being married, just doing it all. So, yeah, multitasker.
What is the most dominant trait that you got from your mother first and then from your father?
I think from my mother, the assertiveness, the advocacy and the assertiveness, advocate for what you want and being assertive and trying to make sure you get what you need in life. From my dad, I got the playful, passionate side. He was pretty passionate and very playful, and I definitely got those traits from my dad.
Sounds like a wonderful family.
Yes.
What was the best advice that you have received from your mother?
My mother would always say to treat people like you want them to treat you, and always humble yourself and not make yourself so common with people. And if she used to tell me that, I'm like, what is she talking about? But I get it. Being common with people, that give people a sense to might not treat you at the best, so it's not good to be so common with people. And then being humble, that's just the best look on a person to me, so she's giving me that.
Humility with confidence, huh?
Yes.
Very good. They say that after you reach a certain age as a woman, you see yourself becoming your mother. So my question to you, Loretta, is in what ways are you becoming your mother, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that my mother's wise. I believe I'm pretty wise, and my mother's very wise, and I think I picked up that trait. But sometimes I picked up a trait that I know I have, that she has, in trying to always kind of be right a little bit and kind of controlling. But I talk to myself and say, self, no, you can't do that. Take that great trait of hers, that wisdom, and you throw that out there, but that controlling spirit, don't do it. And I don't know if I should say that she's controlling it. She just likes things a certain way, and she wants everybody to be okay. And I guess my I look at it as controlling, but it may not even be so much controlling. Just wanting what's the best for her family.
All right. Can you describe an incident in which your mother undoubtedly rescued you from what could have been a really bad situation, and elaborate on it?
Yeah, I think the situation, I remember when I thought I was really prepared for college, but I kind of wasn't so prepared for college like I should have been. So when I went down to Illinois State, I I had my roommate, and my roommate just seemed like she had everything. She had a lot of money and a lot of friends, and she brought furniture down there, just all kind of stuff. So my mother and them, they did what they could do. It was 5 of us. Actually, at that time, it was 2 of us in college at that time. So, we just didn't have as much as in my head, I wanted. So I remember having a little pity party when I went to the aid office, the school aid, where you get your money for your vouchers for your books. Mine wasn't coming in until it was later on, like 2 months, maybe, I guess it might have been October, and school started in August, and I had to go and try to rent books from the library. So I was just feeling a certain way. So I went to the dorm, and I crawled up under it was a payphone, and I called my mother, and I was under that little under the little area, nobody could see me, and I was just kind of crying. I said, I can't do this. I don't have what it takes to be down here. The classes are hard. I don't have really a lot of friends. I don't have what I need. I'm coming home. And you know what she told me? She said, you know what? I'm doing what I can, but at this point in your life, you find somebody down there that's like you, because I know it's people that's in the same situation that have to work and have to go to the library and,
So she was one of the first.
So she kind of pushed me, and at that point, I knew I was going to make it. I was just kind of, I guess I was having a pity party, but she wouldn't even allow it.
All right, so it sounds like you grew up in a home where your mother just didn't tolerate excuses.
Right, exactly.
All right, and that benefited you.
Yes.
Okay. What has your mother, if you can think of something that your mother has not necessarily told you, but that she has modeled for you, and now you know for sure that you model that same thing to the world?
Well, I think she showed me that family is first. You have a lot of people that come and go, but your family is there to stay. And I try to do that, especially with my immediate family, my husband, my daughter. I let them know that I do all kind of things, but they are my first priority. And I think she modeled that, and I took that from her.
Wonderful. Do you think that it was an advantage or disadvantage growing up between literally a very poor part of town and on the other side a very wealthy, rich part of town? You were kind of cased right in the middle. Was that advantageous or to your detriment, or can you speak on that?
Actually, I thought it was good because I used to think, I don't know, growing up, I guess because we lived on Mason, basically, my mother and father, they owned the building. We always had 2 cars in the garage. I looked at the material aspect as we're doing okay. But while on the other side, being Oak Park, it was a little more, I guess, middle class per se. I guess I felt that we was well taken care of, and I didn't think one way or the other about that because we were taken care of. Because even when I grew up and had friends from high school and went away to college, and I would come back and they would live on the south side, and I used to think, ooh, that's the great side. But I met my real good friend Jackie. When she came over, she was like, oh, this is so nice. So I always knew we lived well. I didn't think we didn't live well.
Were there any advantages that you can recall as a child that perhaps you and your sisters benefited from living literally right across the street from a wealthy community? In
Yeah, we
terms,
benefited because we were able to, it's like when we were the first white, like some of the first blacks in the neighborhood. All the tenants was white, and I remember my father used to always say, well, in order for us to move in, they got to move out, and they definitely was moving out. And we were there, and I thought it was a great area, but then for a while, after a while, it kind of took a change and went kind of down, but then maybe 4 or 5 years later, it went right back up. So, what's the question?
I was just asking you to elaborate in terms of, was it to your benefit to live right next to a very wealthy community?
I thought so, but I didn't know that it wasn't. Because even when my father bought the building, he thought we was going to be able to go to Oak Park High School. We didn't even know that we wouldn't be able to go to Oak Park High School because we were so close to Oak Park.
Do you think that was one of the motivations for your dad to buy that building?
Yeah, definitely.
And so do you think then that he was trying to instill in his kids the importance of education and trying to give them the very best educational experience they could have?
Yeah, because my dad was the type that he really wanted us to, education was everything to him. On the other hand, my mom, she pushed education, but she pushed whatever you do, you be a productive member of society. You can get a real good job and do well. But so that was my dad that really pushed the education, more so than my mom.
It sounds to me like, Loretta Coleman, that your family has a lot of political advocacy going on, and they tend to seem to be very politically astute. Do you think then that your father pushing education helped to kind of put that drive in you guys?
Yeah. And then I think because with my mother, my father, even though my father pushed the education, my mother, she was more politically inclined. My father was a minister, so that can be kind of a little bit on the political side as well. But my mother is the one that, she was the political person, because I used to always think, Mama gonna end up running for alderman. Because she used to have, like Danny Davis, she would have, back in the day, they called it a
Tea party.
A coffee sip, I think, where you invite everybody to the house in the neighborhood, and the candidate come in, and you have little snacks, and they give their spiel of why you should vote for them, and she would host those. And then she was really into her community, and she knew about the aldermen, the community people. So I used to think that she would probably end up running for alderman. But part of me was kind of happy that she didn't, because that's a job that will stress you out. So yeah, I was happy that she didn't. But yeah, she was really into politics.
All right. It sounds like you have a wonderful mother, Mrs. Coleman. Sounds like you have a wonderful village, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to converse with us.
All right.
Thank you.
You
and
are welcome.
Goodbye.
Okay. Bye.
What qualities do you admire about your grandmother?
She is very, very headstrong, and I think people take that the wrong way as thinking that they're stubborn, but I think when you raise girls, especially in our society, it's very important to have girls that are headstrong and, know what they want in life, and nobody's going to tell them otherwise. So that would be my favorite quality.